My name is Marcus Rivera. I worked as a 911 dispatcher in San Antonio, Texas here for 7 years. During that time, I answered thousands of calls, accidents, crimes, medical emergencies. You learn to stay calm, no matter what you hear on the other end of the line. But 2 calls changed everything. 2 nights that made me question what was real. 2 calls that shouldn't have happened. These are the stories that made me quit. The first took place in October 2023. It was Thursday, October 14th, 2023. My shift started at 10 p.m., and from the start, something felt wrong. The night was too quiet. In 7 years of responding to 911, I'd never seen a night so dead. No prank calls, no accidents on the highway, nothing. It was as if the entire city was holding its breath. Around 12:47 a.m., all the screens in the emergency center flickered simultaneously. It was brief, less than a second, but we all noticed. The emergency lights didn't activate. The generators didn't kick in. It was as if time had given us a hiccup. My colleague Sarah was discussing this when my phone rang. Line 4. I answered following standard protocol, asking what the emergency was. What I heard on the other side made me freeze. It was heavy, dense static like that old school radio noise when you're searching for a station. But beneath the static, there was a voice, a young, female voice, whispering as if afraid of being overheard by someone or something. She said there was a fire, that she needed help, that she was trapped. I asked for the address, and she gave me a location on Route 281, that old highway that runs through southern Texas between San Antonio and Alice. She said it was a secluded house, just past mile marker 47. I asked her name. Emma Walsh, 19 years old. I immediately initiated fire protocol and dispatched firefighters to the area. Meanwhile, I kept Emma on the line. I asked if she was alone, and her response left me with a sinking feeling in my stomach that I can't describe. She said she was alone now, but that before, her parents and brother were with her. I asked where they were, and Emma said something I'll never forget. She said the fire took them. I tried to remain professionally calm, asking if she was hurt, if she could get out of the house. Emma said she'd tried, but the doors wouldn't open, and then she said something that made my skin crawl. She said the fire was wrong. I asked what she meant by that, and Emma explained that the fire didn't burn like normal fire. It didn't illuminate anything. Everything inside the house was dark, even with the flames. And worse, the fire moved along the walls as if it were alive, as if it had a will of its own. I asked her to move away from the flames, to try to find shelter in a room. Emma said she was in the attic, but that the fire was rising. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said she could hear voices inside the fire, voices screaming, and then she said my name. I hadn't introduced myself. I never say my name during roll calls. It's against protocol. But she knew. She said my name with eerie certainty. And when I asked how she knew, Emma replied that it was written on the attic wall, written in ash. I glanced at Sarah, who was trying to trace the call. She was pale, her eyes fixed on the screen. I leaned closer and saw something impossible. The caller's originating number was 000-000-0000, a number that doesn't exist, a number that can't exist in any phone system. And there was more. The tracking showed that the call was coming from multiple locations at once. The map was dotted with red dots scattered throughout South Texas. I turned my attention to Emma. I asked how long it had been since the fire started. She said she wasn't sure, that it felt like hours, but that her watch was acting strangely. When I asked how, Emma said the clock's hands were spinning backward faster and faster. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was the stress, the trauma, the smoke getting to her. I asked about her parents, about what had happened before the fire started. Emma said they were having dinner. It was her brother Lucas's 16th birthday. Her mother had made a chocolate cake. They were all sitting at the table when the candles on the cake went out by themselves, all at the same time. Her father tried to light them again, but they wouldn't light. And then the temperature in the house began to drop. Emma said she could see her own breath as if she were in a freezer. That's when the fire started. But it didn't start in the kitchen. It didn't start anywhere logical. The fire simply appeared on the walls of the dining room. Black flames, she said. Flames that emitted no light, only shadow. Dad yelled for everyone to get out, but when they ran to the front door, it was gone. Where there should have been a door, there was just a wall, solid, as if there had never been a door there. They tried the windows, but when they looked through, they didn't see the garden. They didn't see the night outside. They saw only darkness, complete darkness, as if there was nothing on the other side of the glass, as if the house had been transported to a place where there was no light. The fire began to spread. Emma said her brother Lucas ran upstairs, trying to find a way out. Her mother followed him. Her father kept trying to break the windows with a chair, but the glass wouldn't break. That's when the fire reached Emma's father. She described it in a way that still gives me nightmares. She said the fire didn't burn him. The fire pulled him in, as if the flames were tentacles, grabbing, dragging. Her father screamed, tried to hold on, but was pulled into the flames. And then he simply disappeared, vanished into the fire. But Emma could still hear him, screaming. Inside, she ran upstairs, looking for her mother and brother. She found her mother in the hallway, frozen, staring at one of the walls. Emma said that when she looked where her mother was looking, she saw something in the flames. Faces, dozens of faces, pressed against the flames as if on the other side of glass, trying to get out. Faces of people screaming silently, hands scratching, trying to break through. And then Emma's mother began walking toward the fire. She simply walked, as if hypnotized. Emma screamed, tried to hold her, but her mother didn't respond. She stepped into the fire, and like her father, she was pulled in. She disappeared. Emma ran looking for Lucas. She found his bedroom door closed. She tried to open it, but it was locked. She shouted her brother's name and knocked on the door. Lucas answered from the other side, saying he was trying to get out through the bedroom window. Emma heard the sound of breaking glass, and then Lucas screamed. She said she'd never heard anyone scream like that. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of absolute, primal terror, and then silence. Emma broke down the door. The room was empty. The window was intact. There was no broken glass. Nothing. Lucas was simply gone. That's when Emma ran to the attic, the last place in the house untouched by the fire. She locked herself in there, found an old phone left in a box, and called me. I asked how the phone still worked if the house was on fire. Emma was silent for a long moment. Then she said she didn't know, that it shouldn't work, that there wasn't even a cable connected. The firefighters arrived at the scene Emma had described in about 15 minutes. While they were on their way, I kept Emma on the line. She was becoming increasingly quiet, more distant. She said the cold was becoming unbearable, that she could see ice forming on the attic walls, even as the fire raged. She said the voices in the fire were getting louder, that she recognized some of them, not just her parents and brother, other voices, people she knew, neighbors, friends, people she swore were alive. When the firefighters reached kilometer 47 on Route 281, the commander called me directly. His voice was shaky, confused. He said he'd found a house in the location Emma had described, an old, abandoned house overgrown with weeds, but there was no fire, no smoke, nothing. I asked him to check again. Enter the house. Search. The commander said he was coming in. I heard his voice on the radio, giving orders to the team. I heard their footsteps, the creak of the old wood flooring, and then I heard the commander whisper one word: impossible. I asked what was going on. It took him almost a minute to answer. When he did, his voice was different, scared. He said the house was covered in soot. Inside, the walls, the ceiling, the floor, everything was black, as if there had been a massive fire. But there was no structural damage. None. The wood wasn't burned, it wasn't damaged, just blackened. And there was more. The soot was hot, not fire heat, body heat, as if it were alive. The team found the dining room table. There were 4 plates, food, a chocolate cake with 16 candles, but everything was covered in black soot, and the candles were melted in a strange way, as if they had melted upward toward the ceiling, defying gravity. Upstairs, they found Lucas's room. The window was intact. but there were handprints on the glass, on the inside, as if someone had pressed their palms against the glass hard enough to bite through. But the cracks were on the outside, as if the pressure had come from the inside out. And in the attic, they found the phone, an old rotary phone, no cord, no battery, just lying on the floor. On the attic wall, written in black soot, was my name, Marcus. And underneath my name was a message: "They are still here." Emma was silent on the line for a long time after the firefighters entered the house. I asked if she was okay, if she was still there. There was no answer for almost 30 seconds. Then she spoke, but her voice was different, softer, more distant. She said she could see them now, her parents, her brother. They were on the other side of the fire, looking at her. They didn't look scared. They looked peaceful. She said they were waving to her, calling her. I tried to get Emma to focus on me, to keep her attention on my voice. I told her the firefighters were at the house, that they would find her, that she just needed to hold on a little longer. But Emma said something that made me realize it was too late. He said he wasn't in the attic anymore, that he'd gone through the fire, that he was on the other side now. She said it was cold here, but it didn't hurt, that her parents were hugging her, that Lucas was smiling. She said there were more people here, lots of people, all waiting. I asked, waiting for what? Emma took a while to answer. He said, for the next house. And then the line went dead. The firefighters searched the entire house. Attic, basement, every room. They found no one, no bodies, no signs that anyone had been there recently, except for the soot and the phone. They searched the name Emma Walsh. They found records. Emma Walsh was 19 years old. She had died along with her parents and brother, Robert and Diana Walsh, and Lucas Walsh, in a house fire on October 14th, 1987. Exactly 36 years to the night she called me. The house where they died was located on Highway 281, kilometer 47, the same house. It was demolished in 1989, 2 years after the fire. But when firefighters checked the land the next day in broad daylight, there was no house there, just an empty lot, surrounded by weeds, with a rusted, "For sale" sign. The recording of the call remained in the archives for 3 days. After that, it became corrupted. When they tried to access it, all they heard was static. And beneath the static, very low, almost imperceptible, whispering voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. No one could identify what they were saying, but everyone who heard them said the same thing, that the voices made them feel something, an irresistible, inexplicable urge, desire to answer the phone. That was the first call. The second came 3 weeks later, the night I resigned. And if the first one scared me, the second one made me understand that there are things in this world that shouldn't be heard. Things that, once heard, never leave you. It was November 4th, 3 weeks after Emma's call. I hadn't slept well since that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that black soot, those faces pressed against the flames. But I kept working. I don't know why. Maybe because stopping meant admitting that what happened was real. My shift started at 10 o'clock at night. It was a Saturday, and downtown was busier than usual. Traffic accidents, bar fights, the usual weekend calls. I was handling it all automatically, trying not to think. Then, at 4:11 in the morning, my phone rang. Line 2. I answered and heard a man's voice. Older, maybe 60. His voice was calm, but with a weight to it, as if he'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. He said he was calling from a chapel, the old San Jerome Chapel in Hudspeth County, West Texas. He said there was a fire inside, but there was no one in the chapel. No one should be there, except he was hearing voices, singing. I initiated the protocol, asking if he was in danger, if anyone was trapped in the building. The man said he didn't know. He'd passed the chapel on his way home and seen an orange light through the windows. He thought it was vandalism, so he stopped to check. As he approached, he heard singing, a choir, but it wasn't normal church songs. It was in Latin, he said, ancient Latin. He recognized it because he had been a seminarian many years ago. And the voices, they weren't human, not exactly. I asked what he meant by that. The man hesitated, then said the voices were very deep, too deep to be human. and there were many of them. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all singing in perfect harmony. I immediately dispatched the fire department and asked the man to give me his name. There was a long pause. Then he said, "Father Michael Cordero," but his voice was strange when he said it, as if the name were a painful memory. I asked if he was safe, if he could get away from the chapel. Father Michael said yes, that he was outside, hiding behind his car, but he couldn't stop looking at the windows. I asked what he was seeing. He said there were shadows moving inside the chapel, human silhouettes, but they moved erratically, too soft, too fluid, as if they were floating, and there was a light. Not the orange light of the fire, a different light. Green like mold, he said. Green like decay. Father Michael began to whisper, almost to himself. He said he knew that chapel, that he had served there many years ago when he was still a priest. He said bad things had happened there, things he had tried to forget. I asked what kind of things. The priest was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was trembling. He said that in 1974, when he was the chapel's priest, a family had been found dead in the confessional. Father, mother, and 3 children, all huddled inside that small wooden booth, dead for days, maybe weeks. No one knew how they had gotten there, or why, and they all had the same expression on their faces. Absolute terror, as if they had seen something the human mind was not meant to see. The priest said that after that, strange things began to happen in the chapel. Candles lit on their own, shadows that corresponded to nothing, and sometimes late at night, he would hear the confessional opening and closing, repeatedly, as if someone were coming in and out, in and out. One night, he decided to wait. He hid in the sacristy watching, and at 3 in the morning he saw the confessional opened, and something came out. It wasn't human, he said. It had the shape of a person, but it was made of shadow, solid, dense shadow, and it moved erratically, as if it weren't really walking, just gliding. The thing walked to the altar. It stood there, and then it turned and looked directly at where the priest was hiding. Father Michael fled. He left the chapel that same night and never returned. He resigned from the priesthood 3 days later. He tried to forget. He spent the last 50 years trying to forget. But now he was there, coming back, without knowing why. The firefighters warned me they were arriving. I kept the priest on the line, trying to keep him calm, but he was becoming increasingly agitated. He said the shadows inside the chapel were moving faster, that the chanting was getting louder, and then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said that one of the chapel windows had opened, and that one of the shadows was leaving, coming towards him. I yelled at him to get in the car and get out of there immediately, but the priest said he couldn't move. His feet were stuck to the ground, as if roots had grown up and trapped him there. The shadow was approaching, slowly, methodically. The priest began to pray, in Latin, the same words the voices inside the chapel were chanting, but in reverse, as if he were trying to undo whatever was being invoked. I heard footsteps, not the priest's footsteps, other footsteps, heavy, slow. Each step made a wet sound, like shoes in mud, and then I heard breathing. It wasn't the priest's breathing. It was something else, close to the phone, so close it felt like it was on my end of the line, here in the emergency center. A deep, guttural breath, like something very large trying to breathe through a very small throat. The priest stopped praying. For a moment, there was only silence. Then he whispered a single word, "No," and he screamed. It wasn't a cry of pain. It was a cry of recognition, as if he'd seen something he knew, something he'd been waiting to see for 50 years. The line didn't go dead. It stayed open, and for 3 minutes and 17 seconds, all I heard was silence. Silence and that breathing. That thing, whatever it was there, on the other end of the line. Listening, I heard my own voice whispering in the protocol, asking if anyone was there, if everything was okay. But I knew it wasn't. I knew something terrible had happened. And then the breathing stopped, and I heard a voice. It wasn't the priest's voice. It was something imitating his voice. The intonation was right, the timbre was right, but there was something fundamentally wrong with it, like a recording played at a slightly off speed. The voice said, "He's here now, where he should be, where he should always have been." I asked who was speaking. The voice didn't answer my question. Instead, it said, "You'll come too, Marcus. When it's your time, everyone comes, eventually." And then he sang, the same Latin song the priest had described, but a single voice, deep, impossible. A voice that made my bones vibrate, that made my teeth ache. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the headset. Firefighters arrived at San Geronimo Chapel 7 minutes after the line went down. The commander called me immediately, and for the first time in my career, I heard genuine fear in the voice of a veteran firefighter. He said he'd found an old car parked in front of the chapel, a 1979 Chevrolet Impala. They ran the license plates. The car was registered to Michael Cordero, but there was no one inside the car. The chapel was on fire, but they weren't normal flames. They were green, phosphorescent green, just as the priest had described, and the fire made no noise. Fire always makes noise, crackling, popping, hissing, but this fire was completely silent, and it wasn't hot. The crew could stand just a few feet from the flames without feeling hot. One of the firefighters got close enough to touch the burning wall. He said it was cold, icy, but the wood was burning, charring, crumbling, as if the fire was consuming not the material, but something else, something essential. The front door was open. The commander ordered the crew not to enter, to wait for the fire to burn out. But one of the younger firefighters, and a boy named David, said he'd heard something inside, someone asking for help. Against orders, David entered, alone. The staff shouted for him to return, but he either didn't listen or wouldn't listen. He disappeared into the chapel in green flames. 30 seconds later, he ran out, stumbling. He fell to his knees on the front lawn and vomited. When he finally managed to speak, all he said was, "There was someone in there. Lots of people. Everyone in the confessional." The team waited for the fire to die down. It took hours. The phosphorescent green glow gradually diminished, until it finally died out completely. And when it did, the chapel simply collapsed. The entire structure collapsed in on itself, as if made of paper. When the dust settled, they went inside to investigate. The interior was completely destroyed, except for one thing, the confessional. It was intact, perfect, without a scratch. As if the fire had deliberately avoided that single piece of the chapel. The commander approached the confessional. There was writing on the door, carved into the wood. Recent. The letters still glowed faintly with that green light. It read, 50 years of waiting, 50 years of debt. Now it's paid. They opened the confessional door. Inside, they found Father Michael Cordero. He was sitting in the confessional position, hands clasped together as if in prayer. His eyes were open, but there was no life in them. There was nothing in them. The body was cold, icy, as if it had been there for days, not minutes, but there were no signs of burns, no marks, except for one thing. His mouth was open, wide open, too wide, as if his jaw had been dislocated or broken, and inside his mouth, visible in the light of the flashlights, was something, ash, black ash completely filling the priest's mouth and throat, as if he'd been forced to swallow, or as if something had grown inside. The coroner, who later examined the body, said there were over 3 kilograms of ash inside the priest's respiratory system, in his lungs, his trachea, his stomach. It couldn't have gotten there naturally. It couldn't have been inhaled. It was as if the ashes had simply materialized inside him. They analyzed the ash. It wasn't burnt wood. It wasn't paper. It was organic matter, human, but not Father Michael. It was from 5 different people, and the DNA matched old records, archives from 1974, the family that had been found dead in the confessional 50 years ago. In the following days, they investigated Father Michael's story more deeply. They discovered things he had never told anyone. In 1974, when the family was found dead in the confessional, Father Michael was the only one with a key to the chapel. He was the only one with access. And there were witnesses who saw him arguing with the family's father days before the deaths. A dispute over money, over church donations that had gone missing. They never proved anything. They never accused the priest of anything. But the suspicions were there. And when he suddenly resigned and left town, many people drew their own conclusions. But there was more, much more. In the chapel archives, they found a diary, written by Father Michael himself. The last entries were from October 1974, days before the deaths. In these entries, he described dreams about the confessional, dreams where he entered and couldn't leave, where the walls closed in, where voices whispered things he didn't want to hear. And in the last entry, dated October 12, 1974, he wrote something disturbing. He wrote, "They know the family knows what I did, where I hid the money. They will expose me, they will destroy me. I cannot let it happen. God forgive me, but I cannot." And then, underneath, in larger, shaky letters, the confessional called to me. I hear his voice. He says he can help. He says he can make them disappear. But there is a price. There is always a price. The next entry was blank. Pages and pages of blank. Until November 2023, 3 weeks before the night he called me. A single line, written in shaky handwriting. "It's time to pay." I realized then what had happened. Father Michael hadn't witnessed something in the chapel that night in 1974. He had done something with the confessional, something that had killed that family. And 50 years later, whatever he had conjured up had come back to collect. The recording of my call with the priest disappeared from the archives 2 days later, just like the recording of Emma's call, simply erased, corrupted. No one could explain how, but I remember. I remember every word, every breath, every second of those calls. I resigned the day after Father Michael died. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't answer that phone without wondering what was coming on the other end. I moved from Texas 3 months later. Now I live in Oregon, far from all this. I work in a library. Silence, peace, books that don't speak back. But sometimes, late at night, when the library is empty and quiet, I hear a telephone ringing, distant, very distant, as if coming from a place that no longer exists. And I know, deep down in my heart, that at some point I'm going to have to answer, because that voice, that thing that spoke to me through Father Michael's phone had said, "You will come too, Marcus. When it is your time, I don't know when it will be. I don't know how it will be, but I know it will happen. And when it happens, when my phone rings in the middle of the night and I answer it, and I hear that static, those voices, I will finally understand what Emma meant by her last words. They are waiting for the next house, because they are not the houses they expect. They are people, and I'm next. My name is Marcus Rivera, and this is my confession." But what if these calls aren't unique? What if there are other stories, other voices, waiting for someone to answer? Would you have the courage to listen? In the pinned comments, there's an exclusive ebook with even more disturbing cases. But be warned, after reading, you might also start hearing the phone ringing.